I know I am a complete stranger, so in order to kind of get rid of the kind of stranger vibes, I'm going to say hi, I'm Dan, and I normally get paid to drink in a basement with strangers. Have you guys heard of the Lost Close?
That?
Yes. Have any of you been down there at all for any of the events or anything? Well, lucky you, because despite the fact that I am a complete stranger, I'm allowed to ask you guys to follow me in the basement. Yes! Come on through, guys. You just might just step all the way down, obviously it's very windy, it's Edinburgh, be mindful. Come on through,
Okay,
guys.
thank you.
Very trusting bunch. Yeah, no one ever leaves this place.
That's cool.
I like this looks kind of like an escape room.
Yeah.
Welcome, guys. This is the entrance to the Lost Close. Sadly, you have to pay to see any more of it. But yes, I'm just going to shuffle through here so that I have this great big map here. So yes, what we'll do, we'll be in here for about 5 minutes. We'll do some introductions and stuff. I'll tell you the history of the space, and then basically do my darndest to convince you guys to come on a whiskey. So the reason I take people down here is basically just kind of to tease the space that we have down here. So long story short, before code was code, it was a bank, and said bank was opened in 1744 and burnt down in 1824 during the Great Fire of Edinburgh. And basically, you've got the Royal Mile just here. One thing to note about this map, this is my favourite little thing to mention, it looks like a fish.
Yeah,
Yep.
it does look like a fish.
Newtown doesn't exist, obviously. This is 1647 this is coming from. But basically, the Great Fire of Edinburgh, someone left a printer on for a bit too long, and it was around the Tron Kirk just here. Everything from here all the way up to St Giles Cathedral was wiped out almost completely. Big tall buildings, they collapsed into a series of alleyways or closes, basically leaving they were completely lost. And rather than scooping the rubble out, they just flatten it and build over the top. So the bottom floor of the bank was lost, as well as a bunch of closes, or alleyways, or whatever, however you want to refer to them. Then upstairs rebuilds, becomes the city's prison and courthouse. I'm sure you guys are aware that code is called the court upstairs, and the reason for that is because it was, well, is anyone staying in the courtroom, out of curiosity? Yes, it was an actual courtroom that's been now turned into a big 28-bed dormitory, and that renovation was actually in the mid-2010s, so very, very recently it converted from court to hostel, and the more you think about it, very easy renovation from prison to hostel. Yes, but yeah, when they were doing that renovation, they did very literally knock through the wrong wall. There was a guy who miscalculated where in the wall he was supposed to knock a hole through. The original intention was to go through a corridor, then create another entrance to a lost and found cupboard, and he miscalculated and basically missed by about 2 meters. He knocked a hole 2 meters to the left of where he was supposed to. Then there was a staircase that led down to a floor that wasn't supposed to be there. And then after a whole bunch of renovating and excavating, we discovered this entire space. For a few months it was used as an expanded storage cupboard for the hostel, but then someone realised it's actually pretty cool. So we should do something other than storage with it. We had some historians come in and try to figure out what specifically the space was, hunt down some blueprints, figure out what it was used for, this, that and the other, and naturally, what do you do with free real estate in Scotland? You drink in it. So we discover a basement, we fill it with whiskey, and we go from there. So, worth mentioning, as hostel guests you are entitled to, I believe it's, depending on the tour, 15 to 20% off on all of our tours. That's whiskey tastings, gin tastings, beer tastings, as well as some coffee tours in the mornings if we aren't big on drinking, although I don't know why you would come to Scotland if you are. But yes, and then the other thing that's worth mentioning is tonight especially, we are doing one of our kind of limited edition tours, which is called Haunted Drams. We originally ran it during Halloween, but we've also realised Edinburgh is a pretty spooky time, pretty spooky place all year round, and it's basically a ghost story themed whiskey tasting.
Nunca hay un alma en esta zona, por eso me ha sorprendido ver algo.
get lost in a crowd. The yellow beanie is strategic as much as it is for fashion.
I tried to be. But yes, so we're just going to start off talking about this fella. This is Charles II. Yeah, guys, feel free to kind of just gather around just here or wander just as long as you can hear me. This is Charles II. First thing to mention about this particular statue, it does not look like Charles II. The guy who was sculpting it did not know what he looked like. So he just made it look like Julius Caesar. And that's kind of it. The time that this was sculpted was in a very particular period of British history in that it was basically sculpted in the period in between the two English civil wars. Long story short, the monarchy was overthrown for a brief period of about 7 years. A fella called Oliver Cromwell ruled instead. That name may seem vaguely familiar to some of you. And then the monarchy was reinstated, and this statue was being sculpted throughout that entire messy political period, if that makes sense. So from there, this guy, in order to basically avoid being hung for treason for sculpting a now deposed, treasonous, like dictator or monarchy that we don't like anymore because they're so politically, I don't know, risky, he just said, fuck it, white guy, and then just kind of left it vaguely there. My favourite thing about that statue, though, is, however, nothing to do with that history and everything to do with the physical statue itself. It is hollow, and over the years, through natural erosion and wear and tear, a series of cracks have formed along the back of the horse. And there have been 3 occasions in the history of this statue where it has filled up with so much water that it has fallen off the pedestal and landed on the side of the road just there.
So would they just fill it with cement?
That would have been one solution, but they did hire a guy who called himself an engineer to fix this problem, and his solution was not cement, which is probably a much better idea. It was to devise a drainage system. He poked one singular hole in the bottom of the horse. He did so in an anatomically accurate position. Yes, after a very, very rainy day, you can see this horse relieving itself, which is lots of fun. Yes, I just find it very, very funny that he had the audacity to call himself an engineer. But yes, any questions about Charles II, Oliver Cromwell?
Oh my god, that is the best.
Yes. So after a very, very, very rainy day, guys, I would recommend making a trip past the Charles II statue. Just out of pure excitement. Yes, so any questions about the anatomy of a horse? Please don't ask me any questions. He is an author who is basically single-handedly responsible for creating Scottish tourism, if that's probably the best way to put it. Long story short, in the 16th, 17th and 18th century, Scotland and England didn't get on very well. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it being a difficult relationship. We don't talk about it very much up here, but basically, as part of this very difficult relationship and the signing of the Act of Union and the Jacobite uprisings and everything, England does what England has a tendency of doing and just releases a bunch of propaganda, making Scotland look like a dark, barbaric place. And if you're not careful and you're walking around the streets of Edinburgh at night, you'll get stabbed by a ginger man in a skirt. It's kind of the idea, the image that they're trying to create with this propaganda. And there is a guy called Sir Walter Scott, who's from Scotland. He is a very, very talented writer, and he doesn't like the reputation that Scotland has. So what does he do? He writes a series of books called the Waverley novels, and he can come through Waverley train station. Obviously that's what the books are named after. And what he basically did is he went around, interviewed a bunch of people on the streets, peasants, but also some of the monarchy, the aristocracy, and pieced together a bunch of stories into a series of novels that were vaguely based on reality, but fictional. And
the main point of these books was to paint Scotland in the most beautiful way possible. The Highlands are gorgeous, Edinburgh's gorgeous, Glasgow's gorgeous, and there's all sorts of different things that they were doing as well. He's so profoundly influential in terms of single-handedly shifting the world's perspective on Scotland that when he dies, it becomes apparent that in his will, he has written, "When you build me a monument to honour my legacy," not if, when you build me a monument to honour my legacy, I want my friend who's a Gothic architect to design the stuff. So that's where the Gothic rocket was born. It sticks out like a sore thumb. You'll notice everything in the new towns are very different architectural style to this, as well as like modernism, brutalism, neoclassical Georgian architecture. Kind of just looks a little bit like London, so you have buildings and construction and stuff, whereas the old town's very distinct. It was such an eyesore at the time. The plans were so jarring to everyone else in Edinburgh that the city council actually sued Sir Walter Scott's legal team after he died, basically saying that your monument doesn't fit our vibe. They sued it based on the basis that the aesthetic of the new town was supposed to be protected, and Sir Walter Scott, he wanted his monument to look very jarring, kind of outstanding. Funnily enough, doesn't fit our vibe, not a great legal justification for anything, so it lost, and the monument was built the originally intended way as well. What I will say, for anyone who's interested, you can go up to the top of the monument. It's a £9 entry, I think. If, however, you are afraid of heights and are very claustrophobic, the way up is a tiny little spiral staircase, like which is so if you're not up for that, perhaps not the thing I would recommend. In order to make people realise that he was a philosopher, the other thing that he famously hated alongside Greek philosophy was superstitions. And you will notice as we walk past, you can actually see it from here as well, his toe is bright golden. The reason his toe is bright golden is because Edinburgh University has developed a superstition where if you're worried about failing your exams, go touch David Hume's toe. His knowledge will be passed on to you and you will pass. Edinburgh loves a good superstition, but to make the Elephant House Cafe, whatever it's called. This is where Harry Potter was written. He was written on taking all the counts. She wrote like maybe one line of the book in there at some point, so that's why there's a big queue there around the corner. But yes, what I will do actually, I'll nip over here. If you guys want to pay attention to the dog that's just over there. That is Bobby the dog. Bobby the dog is the doggiest dog in the big dog. That's how the story goes. Long story short, so you guys noticed a graveyard just over there. Back in the 1700s, there was a series of grave robbings in that particular area. They hired a police officer for the night shift to try and basically just patrol the ground, stop the grave robbings. Bit of a lonely job, imagine this weather at night time all the time. What does he do? He adopts a dog by the name of Bobby. They become besties, and for a year and a half they do the night shift together every single night. Sadly, after about a year and a half, the owner, by the name of John Gray, passes away from tuberculosis, and then Bobby sits by his owner's grave for 13 years. Victoria Street.
Oh, I saw this on TikTok.
Yes!
Yeah!
You and everyone else on the planet. Yeah, so a couple of things to mention. Before we turn on to Victoria Street, we are actually just going to talk about the market just down here. This is what we call the Grassmarket. It's only on a Sunday now that I believe it's still a market. Historically, it is the market for everything that ate grass. Very creative naming, as always. It is also the site of more public executions than anywhere else in the city. The most famous of which being the ones related to people being accused of being witches. A very, very iconic one of these stories is one by, well, someone called Maggie Dixon. Is that ring a bell for anyone? So Maggie Dixon was about 20 years old when she was accused of concealment of pregnancy through witchcraft. Which basically means she had a miscarriage and was then hung because she had a miscarriage. Her execution was then, well, botched. So the guy who was hired as executioner basically made the tightness of the rope the wrong tightness, so she hung for 15 minutes, she passed out, she did not die. Although at this point in history we're not very good at checking for pulses, so what did we then do? Put her into a coffin, she was alive, and took her 45 minutes east of Edinburgh to a place called Musselburgh, and as she was literally in the process of being buried, she knocks on the coffin. She knocks on the coffin and is let out, and then the strangest thing happens. Despite the fact that Maggie Dixon has just defied the laws of physics as far as these people are concerned and cheated death, no one thinks she's a witch anymore. Naturally, they think she's blessed by God instead, because they make it all up as they go along back in the day. So she is allowed to live, and she is also the reason that basically in every legal ruling since then, anyone who is sentenced to be executed, their sentence was to be hung, until death, as opposed to before Maggie Dixon it was just to be hung. So the justification that was used to keep her alive was she hung, she just didn't die. And that's kind of where we went from there. Maggie Dixon then continued to live her life well into her 60s, which back in the 17th, 18th century was pretty good going. She allegedly murdered her husband in her 40s. Some people call her Carla, and she was such an icon that when she died, she had a pub named after her. And that is the highest honour that any Edinburgh resident can have. A man can dream. Yes. Any questions about Maggie Dixon, witchcraft, or the Grassmarket?
Sorry, how old was she when she was hung?
When she was hung, she was about 20 years old.
Oh, okay.
And then lived well into her 60s. So, may or may not have murdered her husband as well, which is always fun. But yes, if there aren't any questions or anything, this is Victoria Street. It's very, very colourful. It winds all the way up, and the colours are actually there because it curves all the way up. Basically, long story short, Victoria Street used to have a bunch of stalls in front of all of the shops, and there were instances of people disagreeing over who owned what land on the road. So they basically came up with a solution where they painted every single shop a white colour, and they could trace the colour, like the difference in colour, decide I own this land, you own that land. Sorry, confused. Okay, awesome. This is just further up the street. Just
When you die, I hope that people hear that through the closest end was they're walking around the grocery store.
Very lovely courtyard.
Yes. We've had that garden. It's actually really nice and stuff. Very much your classic Edinburgh courtyard, because in theory, cute little community garden just there, and kegs for clubs. Yeah. What I like like to talk about here is, I mean, this is James's Court, which is very much your classic Edinburgh courtyard. One of my favourite things about the old town is, despite the construction, the noise, the tourists, the bagpipes, everything else, you walk through one tiny little corridor and it's as well. So I love these little courtyards. My favourite one, if anyone has the time, Dunbar Street Garden, just down towards the bottom. It's on the Canongate, which is the bottom half of the Royal Mile. It's absolutely gorgeous. So Edinburgh got its first ever toilet in 1868, which by the standards of the UK and by Western Europe was very, very late for a very densely populated city. Edinburgh's old town, which was about half a square mile squared and basically was the centre of the city for the longest time, long story short, for whatever political reasons, there was a wall built around the old town, so they kind of walled off half a square mile squared, half a mile squared, and basically charged people half of their annual salary, because when you're stuck in half a square mile radius, there's not much else to do. But basically, very densely populated city. They also didn't use toilets. They had a neat little contraption called, a bucket, and a window, throwing it out the window, and that was the kind of way that they disposed of waste. It's also why flats at the bottom were exponentially cheaper than any other flat in the building, as you can imagine. Also, flats towards the bottom of the Royal Mile were always cheaper as well, because gravity's a thing, and it always tends to roll down. But yes, this is kind of where my favourite story comes about. So basically, there was an organisation called the Aristocratic Dignified Ladies' League of Edinburgh, who kind of petitioned the city government to basically introduce some legislation to kind of combat the hygiene problem that would become a major issue on the streets of Edinburgh. This law that was then drafted at the request of this particular league and then put through the city government was called the Nastiness Act. Best name for any good law ever. So the Nastiness Act was then put into effect. What did this introduce? Didn't say that we should start using toilets. It started introducing basically a curfew for the certain times of day that you could throw waste out of your window. The rules were you could only throw waste out of your window between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. at night. So it basically meant that people could go about their daily business without worrying about things flying from above. However, something they did not foresee was 2 years later, the city government passed another law that introduced a curfew for all of the city's pubs at 10 p.m. So I'm not sure if anyone's connecting the dots there, but basically at 10 p.m. all of the city's pubs, the doors are shut, all of the city's alcoholics and drunkards are thrust out into the street to make their way home, and at the same time all of the city's windows are opening for some particular reason, and on their way home, as a drunk person stumbling your way home, and you hear someone shouting, it was Gardyloo was the phrase that they used, which was basically just a bastardization of French, look out for the water. It was not water. And basically they would say, look out below, and as a very drunk person stumbling your way home, what do? You stop, you don't quite hear them, so what do? You look up. Has anyone heard of the word shit-faced?
Yes.
Edinburgh's old town is where shit-faced comes from. We can proudly claim that word as one of our own as well. And hence, history of plumbing in Edinburgh, for anyone who's interested. That always tends to be the story that people take home with them, which is always quite fun. But yeah, other than that, guys, that's kind of it for my kind of random historical stories that I have. Any questions about the history, about James's Court, about the Mile, about anything else?
So what is it now? Is it apartments or is it office buildings?
85% Airbnb.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Airbnb, okay.
Old Town is pretty bad for that.
Oh, right.
There are constant discussions in the council about regulating how many Airbnbs. Can you own more than one Airbnb? Things like that.
But it must be quite expensive to live here. So exactly.
Oh, yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
I have a friend who lives in what can only be described as a shed and pays twice as much as I do, purely because it's so in demand as well. And I mean, from a landlord's perspective, you can also understand.
Yeah, the mortgage and all that must be high.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine like you can get maybe £1,000 a month for a one bed.
In this area?
£1,000 for like a studio.
Oh, okay. Well, that's really cheap compared to London.
Well, compared to London, yes. I mean, London's
You will never.
Its own thing.
Yeah,
900 to live in a house with 7 people, but there's like 8 people that actually live there.
But is that in central London? That's not central.
No, that's not essential.
It's only Acton.
I can. Oh.